In the Doha Summit, the Arab-Israeli conflict takes a backseat to inter-Arab reconciliation and the Sudanese president arrest warrant. For how long will the Arab Peace Initiative remain on the table? And can the Arab League in its current form cope with the growing regional and global challenges? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I am Hashim Al-Barra. The Arab League, ideally a symbol of unity, but in reality far from it. It was established with the goal of strengthening ties among member states and coordinating policies for their common good. But instead, it has often served as an arena for regional disputes. The Arab League meetings have often been marked by heated disputes and divisions among individual members. And this year's summit held in Qatar was no different. It was marred by the absence of the Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak and the ICC arrest warrant for the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, who is accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity. The summit was supposed to forge a united stance over Iran and Israel and promote a reconciliation between feuding Palestinian factions. But these key issues were sidelined and very little was achieved. Speaking of the conflict with Israel, the Arab League reiterated their commitment to the peace initiative introduced in 2002. The initiative calls for a full Israeli withdrawal from all territories occupied since 1967, establishment of a Palestinian state, and achievement of a just solution to the Palestinian refugee problem. The Arab League Secretary General Amr Moussa indicated that a time frame to achieve these goals is necessary to show that the Arabs are serious about achieving peace.
We cannot wait, and it's not logical to wait indefinitely until Israel becomes ready to accept the initiative. Meanwhile, the initiative wouldn't remain there for a year, 10, 20, or even 30 years. If we accept such conditions, we would be gullible, if not mad.
As the summit concluded, the Qatari Prime Minister Hamad bin Jassim Al Thani said that the Arab world goes through periods of optimism and pessimism depending on the Israeli government, and this ought to change.
We should stop hoping for things to happen. Years have gone by since Madrid Peace Conference. As we see, our hopes rise and fall every few days. That is why there should be a stance and a time frame. We should not count on possible positive changes taking place in Israel. As conditions continue to deteriorate, sometimes we are told this is a weak Israeli government incapable of concluding peace. Other times, we are told this is a hawkish government which does not believe in peace. And we keep on waiting and hoping the next Israeli government would be better. But really, how many times have we been promised by a superpower that the Palestinian state would be announced soon, only to have our hopes dashed by inappropriate circumstances in Israel for such a move to occur?
Joining us now, our guest here at the summit, Abdelbari Atwan. He is editor-in-chief of the newspaper Al-Quds Al-Arabi. Also in Doha, Adil Darwish, commentator on Middle Eastern affairs. And joining us from London, Ian Black. He is Middle East editor of Britain's Guardian newspaper. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for joining us. Let me start by asking Mr. Abdelbari Atwan, the fact that the Middle East, the Arab Peace Initiative was sort of relegated to a second position, is this something which is justified this time in Doha?
Yes, it is justified. I believe this summit was hijacked by Gaddafi when he burst in attacking the Saudi monarch, King Abdullah of Abdulaziz. And after that, the whole of the session actually, or the whole of the summit, was concentrating on how to bring Gaddafi back to the summit, how they reconcile him with King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz. And in the end, the summit was shortened to 1 day only. So I think that the Arab-Israeli conflict, the most important issue in the Arab summit, was actually put in the back seat. It's not actually in the front as many people expected. It's a very hot issue now. We have Israeli right-wing government is going to take over soon, and we have a new American administration. So I believe this summit gave the wrong signal to the Israeli government, the new government, and also to the new American administration by not taking a very firm stand vis-a-vis this hot issue.
Mr. Adil, do you think that it's high time to re-examine the priorities when it comes to the agenda of Arab summits?
Well, I think the priority of each country, each nation, no nation is going to put the so-called collective plans or collective agenda before its own national agenda. And perhaps they should go back to the old idea of what really they wanted. I mean, if you think that the Arabs first met in Anshas in Egypt in 1946, and the Europeans first meeting in the Club of Rome was 12 years later, and because the Europeans took modest steps into focusing on economic first, the Arabs, that was the initial plan, and then comes the Colonel Nasser and various military coups and the whole revolutionary sort of rhetoric, that it became the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, became the Arab-Israeli conflict, and that hijacked all every Arab summit, as Abdelbari Atwan correctly said. And I think they have to go back to basics and really examine what they want. What is the real agenda? They have really to be realistic. And the Sudanese came, and the last thing on their mind, of course, was the Palestinian-Israeli conflict or rebuilding Gaza. That was the last thing on their mind. And perhaps it was actually a God sent, and it's a blessing in disguise that actually make them really take a bite of the sandwich of reality before actually starting the next summit.
We'll go back in detail to talk about all the issues of the Arab Summit. But let me go to A.M. Black. And this is a summit like all other summits which have been seen from an Arab perspective as tackling top priorities in the Arab world. For some Arabs, well, it shows that Arab leaders are totally detached from reality. They're talking about issues when normally they should tackle things like poverty, illiteracy, and haunting issues. How do you think of this Doha Summit from your perspective?
Well, I think that as seen from the West, and I'm here in London, I think the most striking thing about the Doha Summit was the way in which it was dominated by, first of all, by the support expressed for President Omar al-Bashir from Sudan in the face of the arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court, first of all, and then, of course, by, as Abdelbari said, the display by the Libyan leader, which of course hijacked the headlines and relegated the more substantial issues of the summit to a long way down the agenda. And I have to say that I don't think the Arab League, as viewed through the prism of these summits, ends up looking very good. I find it quite an interesting comparison. Again, from here in Britain, we've had a lot, we always in recent years had many European Union summits which have acquired a bit of a reputation for attracting a lot of attention but not achieving very much. But I have to say that by comparison, the Arab summits of recent years look even worse, far more divided and far less substantial in terms of what they achieve.
Absolutely, the divide has been there for many years. Abdelbari, 7 years after the Arab Peace Initiative was launched, Amr Moussa, the Secretary General of the Arab League, and the Prime Minister of Qatar were talking about a significant change. They're saying that this time we have a time frame. We're not going to wait forever. We're not going to say this is a right-wing government or this is going to be a left-wing government. We're going to give the Israelis 1 year. If they don't comply by the international laws and resolutions, we're going to revoke our initiative. How significant is this change in the Arab mindset?
It is definitely extremely significant. For the first time, they put a deadline for the Israeli, for the American administration to move in order to implement or actually take positive reaction toward this Arab Peace Initiative. Before, it was actually loose-end, it was open-ended, it wasn't actually deadline like that, the way we are seeing here in this summit. This comes simply because the Arab people were extremely frustrated. In the last Kuwait summit, they said it wouldn't be on the table for long, but they didn't say that, we will revoke it if the Israelis are not responding positively toward it. I think the Israeli new government is very clear about this peace initiative. They said we don't believe on two-state solution. We are not going to accept it. And also they said we are going to continue settlement around Jerusalem. So it means they will kill this peace initiative even before waiting until the end of this year as the framework of the Arab League.
A significant move, as Abdelbari Atwan said. But Mr. Adel, don't you think that others might say it was not a very smart move by the Arabs, because at least they are putting more pressure on the Obama administration when it really needs more time to discover all the venues in the Arab world before putting together a new initiative?
Perhaps I should introduce a dose of realism here. I think the danger of putting deadline on anything, what are you going to do when the deadline approaches? And if someone sitting in Israel says, ha ha, what are you going to do about it? It is actually finished, your deadline. The thing here is, I don't think it was actually a starter, this so-called Arab peace initiatives. If we look at the history of peace treaties that actually were signed in the region or throughout history, it's between two legal entities, a nation state. The international law does not actually recognize who is going to sign actually for the Arab peace initiative. If I'm an Israeli, I would be totally skeptical. I want to sign it with another counterpart, a nation state. If the Israeli Prime Minister want to actually sign it with another Prime Minister, not with a Secretary League of an organization which is a collection of different treaties and different accords. That's what the Arab League is. It's not like the European Union. Even the European Union, actually, a country cannot sign this kind of treaty. It can sign perhaps a trade agreement or a letter exchange memoranda of understanding, but not really. Peace treaties are signed between two nation states, and I think that's actually what's wrong with it. So in addition to the danger of putting a deadline that you don't actually know what you're going to do at the end of this deadline if your conditions are not met, the non-clarity of what it means, the Arab Peace Initiative.
All right. Ayan, this is not the first time that the Arabs threatened to withdraw the initiative from the table. Back in Kuwait, King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz of Saudi Arabia said that my initiative, or the Arab initiative, is not going to be there forever. Do you think that this time frame has the potential to produce a psychological impact, at least, on the EU and the US?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, the problem at the moment, it seems to me, looking at the Middle East and the ever central issue of the Israeli-Arab conflict, or the core of that, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the problem is that the time isn't right. It's a terrible thing to say, because we saw only very recently in the Gaza war just how urgent it was to try to break out of the cycle of violence and retribution. But the time isn't ripe. We have a new American administration under Barack Obama in which huge hope has been invested. But there are huge diversions. There's the global economic crisis, with the G20 just about to come together in London for the summit to look at that. There are other overarching issues that are even more directly relevant to the Middle East, like the Iranian election and Obama reaching out, as he has done already early on, to the Iranians. There's, even as we speak, there's the formation of a new Israeli government, which is as about a right-wing government as we've ever seen, with the Palestinians still crippled by their own divisions. And we forget, it had been hoped in the last few weeks that maybe Palestinian reconciliation could have been the centerpiece of this Doha summit, so that there could be some sense of at least one party to the conflict and getting its act together. So in that context, when everything is so unclear, to impose a deadline now, I can understand the political pressure for it. Whether it's a wise thing to do is another matter. Maybe the new Israeli government will just ignore it, as it has done really largely so far.
And maybe because the Arab leaders had their own parochial and political calculations, which leads us to another interesting issue. The Libyan leader Muammar al-Gaddafi pointed out that the Arab League is in dire need of reform to be able to cope with the growing challenges. He suggested a few changes.
I wish the Arab Summit President had prerogatives and was able to act on behalf of the other members of the Arab League. The Arab League Secretary General should be reporting to the rotating President, as it is the case in the African Union. And the President should be able to meet with the Secretary General during the year to follow up on the implementation of the decisions taken by Arab leaders at the summit. I also wish we had a representative for the Arab Summit foreign policy, just like the post Solana holds at the EU. It could be Amr Moussa, followed by someone else. The Secretary General could be chosen each time from a different Arab country and not just from one country.
Abdelbari, the Arab League has been described by commentators as one of the most inefficient and perhaps irrelevant bodies in the world. Is the Arab League in its current form up to the task?
It is not. It's not up to the tasks. All the criticism against this Arab League secretarial is justified, to be honest, simply because that for the last few years it is ridden by this bureaucracy. But the problem is, we have to understand that it is the Arab League which is representing the Arab regimes. So if the Arab regimes inefficient, corrupt, and dictatorship, what do you expect the Arab League will be? It is like a mirror. The Arab regimes see themselves in this mirror. So we cannot expect the Arab League to be perfect while the Arab regimes are really ridden with corruption and dictatorship. But now, why they are raising the question of reforms now? Simply because many countries, they are not happy with the performance of Amr Moussa, the General Secretary of the Arab League. So they are talking about reforms in order to get rid of him. They are sending a message to him: you are not efficient, you are not accepted as you used to be, simply because he took side during Lebanese crisis, for example. He took the moderate Arab sides. So other people like Bashar al-Assad of Syria, Colonel Gaddafi of Libya, they are not happy with him because they consider him as a bias.
And behind closed doors, by the way, some of the delegates have been saying in Kuwait and here in Qatar, why should Secretary General be for the last, I think, 4 decades, just from one country, particularly Egypt? Is this genuine or politically motivated, the call for a change?
Well, I actually can't help really sort of raising my eyebrows here, because on one hand, Abdelbari says, well, it's a reflection of dictatorial regimes, and on the other hand, he quotes the two most dictatorial regimes in the world, the Syrian regime and the Libyan regime, in actually calling for reform. I think Colonel Gaddafi here shows a great deal of misunderstanding by comparing the African Union, which has actually a goal to move towards European Union style kind of a mega federation, and that of the Arab League. Again, the Arab League is an accumulation of at least, I think, 3 treaties, and the rest are accords. That is totally different altogether from the union that I was talking about. What the radicals want to say, they wanted actually to go back to the days of Colonel Nasser, when the Arab League actually was hijacked by the radicals, and it was used by fellow Arab heads of states to discredit them before the eyes of their people. I think that is all finished now. Economy is the moving and the propelling force of world politics. And if any reform we want, it's just on the economic and the trade and lowering trade barriers between members of the Arab League. And I think let the politics take a back seat if really the Arabs want to move from the 1960s rhetoric to the 21st century.
Let me include our guest in London. And Muammar al-Gaddafi yesterday in his speech was saying, why don't we follow the example of the Africans who seem to be doing better than the Arabs, or at least follow the example of the EU? Is this a matter of substance or form in the Arab world that is crippling the Arab League?
Well, the comparison that I find most useful is the one with the European Union, which has, of course, been around for actually less time than the Arab League, as Adel pointed out. But behind the European Union was an impulse to do something different in terms of regional organization and indeed integration. And I think really that's where the Arab League really falls short. It really isn't any more, as far as I can see, than a mechanism for coordinating between governments. In Europe, people talk about the intergovernmental principle, and people who are committed to integration talk about that with disdain, even contempt, because that falls very far short of what real integration is supposed to be about. The Arab League has never really, as far as I can see, set itself such an ambitious goal. It isn't more than a mechanism, or very much more than a mechanism for coordination. And we all know, just look at the summit that has just taken place and the 4 other summits of different kinds that were held during the Gaza crisis in January. Never mind coordination, there are profound and fundamental differences between some of the most important of the 22 member states, whether it's their relations with Iran, for example, on the one hand, or with Israel, whether it's their relationship with the United States or a hostile relationship with the United States. So I'm afraid that in terms of integration of countries doing things together, the Arab League is a very, very long way away from anything like that.
Talking about the divide, Abdelbari Atwan, do you think that the Doha Summit succeeded in a sense or another in mending the fences between the so-called moderate Arab states and the other clan, which is sort of spearheaded by Syria?
Actually, the division between the 2 camps at the Arab world, the moderate camps and the non-moderate camps, I wouldn't say, you know, the resistance camp, actually faded away, eroded, because, you know, when the American administration decided to open dialogue with the Iranian government, we noticed that the tone is completely different. The Arab are not really as hostile as they used to against Iran before, as they used to be before the Americans started this dialogue and starting to actually involve the Iranian on the affair to find solution for the situation in Afghanistan. So I think this new American administration moves embarrassed the moderate Arab camps in particular, because they found themselves actually without the motivation as it used to be. So why should they actually isolate Syria while the American, because of its alliance with Iran, while the Americans are talking to the Iranians?
Do you think, Adil Darwish, that the divide is the main factor which is crippling the Arab League?
I think we have to redefine our terminology, because again, we're still sort of looking at the Arab League as if actually one body. It isn't. It is, as I said, accumulation of different treaties and different accords. And again, I repeat it again, no way, I mean, for example, the Egyptian national interests required the Egyptian president to actually decide on a low-profile representation in the Arab League. I mean, no one in his right mind will actually go against his own or her own national interest, and that's what it is. We have to actually be realistic. There are national interests of 22 different national interests that erodes any collective interest.
Abdelbari, in less than 1 minute, please. Wherever you go in the Arab world, people will tell you, we really don't care about the Arab Summit. We've been watching them, listening to them for decades. They talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. So do we have to rechange the whole concept of an Arab get-together, or we should start from scratch?
Actually, we shouldn't change the concept. We should change the leaders. Honestly, the problem is not the concept. It's the problem. The problems are on the leaders. Yeah, this is the crux of the matters. You know, it is nice to have, you know, an entity called the Arab League. It is nice to have a bloc of Arab nations. Now we have European bloc, we have Arab bloc, we have Southeast Asian blocs, so South American blocs. Why we cannot have an Arab bloc, an Arab unity, for example, or Arab League? So the problem in the Arab regimes, as I said, you know, and that's why people lost faith in the Arab League, but they didn't lose faith in actually in the concept itself.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your insights on the Arab League and the challenges it's facing for the future. Abdelbari Atwan, Adil Darwish and AM Black, thank you very much indeed. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Goodbye for now. Thank you very much indeed.